You see, I'm a simple college student, living alone in an apartment. I was very enthusiastic about the release of Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver here in the States. I had purposely locked myself out of all media in the internet, aside for school purposes. That meant no 4chan, no Bulbapedia, etc. As I was busy with the school year and being poor at the time, I wasn't able to buy Soul Silver on its launch date. After my school year ended, I ordered Soul Silver on Amazon. However, it would take a week for it to arrive. I decided that during that time, I would replay my Crystal version on my Game Boy Color. However, I then realized that long ago, my mom threw it away because I had told her that the save had went dead, and I was also very upset about it then. She also threw away my Silver version, so all I had was my Game Boy Color. As such, I set out to GameStop and bought a used Silver version, as that's the only Pokemon game left that they had for the Game Boy Color. $10. Fairly cheap. I went home and started it up for a nostalgia trip. However, that's where things started getting bizarre, and most likely the reason why you read this. The Game Freak logo started up as normal, but it just froze there. I thought the cart was errored or something, so I turned it off and back on. The same thing happened. I tried pressing the A and start button over and over in all of the buttons. Eventually, the logo vanished, and there was a black screen for about 5 seconds. Suddenly, rather than going to the usual menu screen, I was already in the game in a previous saved file, which was odd as I was expecting all these carts to have been wiped by the poor battery. Either way, I wasn't complaining, as I would have chosen the continue option to see what the previous guy did anyways. First things first, I checked his trainer information. His name was just ... He didn't have much originality. I checked his profile, and apparently he had 99999 hours put into the game, with all 16 badges, 99,999.9 Pokédollars, and all 251 Pokemon on the Pokedex. Seeing as he apparently had Mew and Celebi logged also, I'm guessing he either used a Game Genie or was a really hardcore Pokemon player back then. I checked his Pokemon to see what kind of awesome team he had. To my surprise, I saw 5 unknowns and a 6th Pokemon named Hurry. I was thinking that this must have been some cruel joke by the person who last played this game, but I decided to check the profile of these Pokemon anyways. As I expected, they were all different letters of unknown, all level 5. I was a bit shaky with my unknown alphabet at the time, but I identified the word spelled out to be leave. As for the 6th Pokemon, it turned out to be a Cyndaquil. Mind you, this is before there were individualized Pokemon icons. The Cyndaquil looked normal, but it was only level 5, with 1 HP left and only 2 attacks. Leer and Flash. I don't know why they named him Hurry, but at the time I just disregarded it. The most eerie thing was that, despite my volume being at max, none of the Pokemon had said their usual cries. Just pure silence. Having enough of the team, I closed it. I was parked inside what seemed to be a room in Bellsprout Tower. However, for some reason, there were no NPCs around. Even more eerie was that the pillar in the middle didn't move at all, as if just leaning on its side. There was no music at all, and there was no exit or ladder. Or at least I thought there wasn't. I walked around for a few minutes, but couldn't seem to find a way out. This was certainly not a room I'd seen in Bellsprout Tower before. I tried checking my items for an escape rope, but the bag was completely empty. There weren't any wild Pokemon either. Finally, I managed to find a ladder, which turned out to be behind the pillar. The screen turned black and music finally started playing. I had a sudden chill as I recognized that the melody I heard to be the theme that you hear when you listen to the radio at the ruins of Alph, where most of the unknown are. I immediately realized that it wasn't a loading transition, but rather I was in a dark room, and I immediately realized that it wasn't a loading transition, but rather I was in a dark room. It would need flash. Before I took care of that though, I immediately checked my Pokegear to change the radio to something more pleasant. But it turned out there was no radio card, or even a phone, nor time cards. There was only a map card in which Gold, ... from earlier, and I will call him Gold from now on, was just walking in the midst of black. I recalled that Cyndaquil had flash, so I turned off my Pokegear and made it use it. I didn't see any message saying, "Hurry has used flash" or something like that. The room just became lit up, and I soon regretted it. The room was a chilling blood red, with a linear gray path heading south. The ladder I'd used to go up and down was not there at all. I had no choice but to head south. The screen got darker every 20 steps I made, until I finally made it to the end, which appeared to be a sign. Reading the sign, it had said, "Turn back now." Suddenly, I was asked to answer yes or no, but there was no question asked. I chose yes, not knowing what it was asking, and the screen went black again, making a ladder climb sound. The unknown radio music stopped, and in a few seconds it was replaced with the not as creepy polka flute radio music. I was in another dark room, but I held my breath and used flash again. Suddenly, it had said that Hurry has fainted, which was odd since I recalled that there was no status conditions on him like poison or anything, and I clearly wasn't in a battle. I checked my Pokemon quickly, and suddenly he was no longer in my party. In fact, after a bit of investigating, none of my Pokemon were there, but instead they were all replaced with level 10 unknown. I did the same thing as before and spelled out the unknown. What I saw had chilled me. The unknown had spelled, "He died." Either way, after that creepy change, the room was lit to reveal myself in a very small room that appears to be only 4 big squares. The walls of the room were gray bricks, as if I was inside something that was hollowed out. Outside that room appeared to be a bunch of graves similar to the ones in Pokemon Red and Blue. I had walked around that small room and pressed A, but nothing happened. I had already concluded that this was clearly a hacked game and some sadistic idiot sold it to GameStop. However, my curiosity kept me going. I checked the trainer profile of Gold again, only to find out that his sprite was missing its arms. He also seemed to appear less smug, but rather more sad and empty, in a way that I don't know how to describe. For some reason, it also said that he had 24 badges, which was clearly impossible. After a few minutes of aimless wandering, my character suddenly spun and did the escape rope animation. Instead of flying up though, my character spun downwards slowly, as if sinking. After that, the music had stopped. After finally landing, the overworld sprite of Gold was now colored differently. Instead of the usual red color he dons, he appeared completely white, including his skin. It was as if he came straight from the colorless Game Boy games, placed onto a colored background of the Game Boy Color. I checked his profile, and his full sprite, which was now as white as his overworld sprite, had lost his legs and had what appeared to be bloody tears streaming from his eyes. It also said that he now had 32 badges, which started to disturb me as this change of numbers seems to represent something important. I also checked my Pokemon, which this time contained 5 unknowns and a level 100 Celebi without a name. The unknown are this time level 15 and spelling out dying. I checked the Celebi's profile. It was a shiny Celebi, except there was only half of the sprite, 1 leg, 1 arm, and 1 eye, and it had only 1 attack, Perish Song. The area I was in itself was the Sprout Tower with the immobile pillar as before, except everything was apparently red. I walked north for what felt like forever. Eventually, I finally encountered some generic men and women NPCs. They were all lined up to the side, just facing the long slanted pillar in the middle. They were also white, and nothing happened when I tried to speak to them. I kept on going north until eventually the pillar finally appeared to be chopped off with a transparent red in that spot. I went up to red, and without even pressing A, I was suddenly engaged in a battle. The music had started, which again sounded like the unknown radio music, except playing backwards. Gold's back sprite matched the front one with the bloody eyes, white skin, and lack of arms, while Red's sprite was the same as before in gold, silver, and crystal, except transparent. The text simply said, "Wants to battle," as if he had no name, and both of us only had one Pokemon each, which was weird as I swore I had 6 with the unknowns. My shiny Celebi came out, conveniently with a half sprite for a back sprite as well. The shiny noise and animation was different, as the sound it made sounded like multiple screech attacks being used consecutively. Red then sent out a seemingly normal male Pikachu, except that it was level 255, and its sprite seemed rather sad and had tears in its eyes. Rather than the usual fight, item, Pokemon, and run menu, I was only given the option to attack. Since Celebi only had one, I chose it. Naturally, Pikachu was level 255, so he went first. Pikachu had used Curse, lowering its speed and increasing his other stats. I'm not even sure if Pikachu could learn it. Celebi then used Perish Song. In 3 turns, both of them would be KO'd, not like I had a choice. At this point, it didn't even go back to the fight menu, as the battle just continued without me. Also note that there were no animations at all for some reason. Pikachu had used Flail, which didn't seem to do much damage despite his level. Celebi used Perish Song. Nothing happened. Pikachu used Frustration, which apparently did a crap ton of damage, knocking Celebi down to less than 10 HP. Celebi then used Pain Split, which surprised me as Celebi didn't even have that attack in the first place. Now Celebi and Pikachu both had 150 HP. Pikachu used Mean Look, not like it did anything. As expected, due to the effects of Perish Song, my Celebi fainted, except in the text it said, "Celebi has died," and instead of the ordinary drop off the screen animation, the back sprite just vanished. For some reason, the Pikachu was still up, even with the Perish Song, and it didn't count as a loss. Pikachu had used one more different attack, going beyond the 4 attack limit. Pikachu used Destiny Bond. Afterwards it had said, "Pikachu has died," with a slow fade-out animation. Apparently, I was the winner, as the transparent red sprite showed up, and didn't say anything. At that point, I was freaked out, as that transparent red sprite was suddenly beheaded, leaving nothing but his transparent body. The battle then ended at that point and faded out along with the music. I was back in the overworld with another change to Gold's sprite. He was now as transparent as Red's overworld sprite. I quickly checked his profile, where this time, the only thing that remained of him was his head with transparent skin. The head was zoomed in a bit, showing black voids in his eyes. It now stated that he had 40 badges. I then backed out and checked my Pokemon. They were all level 20 shiny unknown, which when read spelled out "no more." I was at what I now know is next to the end. There was apparently no music playing, but for some reason, I still felt like there was something that could be heard. I was back in my room in New Bark Town. Maybe finally I'd get to play this game properly. But who was I kidding? I knew that the person who hacked this game must have done something. I walked around my room to interact with things, as I was a bit afraid to go down the stairs to see what was there. Note that I said walked, as while the background was moving, Gold was not moving his transparent limbs at all while doing so, just floating like those ghosts you see in Diamond and Pearl. As expected, the radio, computer, and TV didn't work, so I had no choice but to go downstairs. I ended up in the same lower level room of my house. Everything had appeared the same, except Gold's mom wasn't home. After failing to interact with anything in this room, I decided to go outside. To my surprise, that door leading outside at the south didn't work, and instead I just walked straight through it into a void. I continued moving south to see just what the heck was going on, and my house vanished as I headed south. It was creepy, as when I entered the void, the outline on the gold sprite turned white to contrast with the pitch black. Eventually, I reached a white area and gold sprite turned black and transparent again. I continued south without thinking of stopping at all. After a long trek, I finally encountered something. It was Gold's regular sprite. I talked to it, and he said, "Goodbye forever," and vanished. As that happened, it said, "????, use nightmare," which at that point, I would not deny that being possible. Gold did another escape rope animation, spinning slowly downward like before. I was now back in that small, hollowed-out room surrounded by graves earlier. Or at least, I say I was back there, as there was no sprite anymore. I tried to walk around, but nothing moved, not even a wall bumping noise. I checked my trainer profile with absolutely no gold sprite left. It said I had 0 badges, and all pictures of the Johto gym leaders at the bottom were replaced with skulls. I checked my Pokemon, which were all level 25 unknown. As expected, it spelled out a phrase that I dared to read. "I'm dead." As soon as I went back to the overworld, the room I was supposedly in was then covered with the same blocks as the walls. I then figured out what exactly that room was when the final text was, "Rest in peace." That room was a giant grave, surrounded by other graves. Gold was already dead. He died presumably a few years after he defeated Red. He was a young trainer who, despite his efforts in collecting so many badges and attempts at becoming a Pokemon Master, he was still unable to avoid the inevitable fate of death, and his efforts were eventually forgotten by the next generation. I was unable to escape from that text no matter what I pressed. I tried resetting the game and the same thing happened, at which I finally decided to give up that horrible nightmare. After that experience, I'll never look at the gimmick unknown the same way again. They say that only the first generation has folk tales and legends, but the second generation has shown me how unpleasant the truth can be. Now, don't get me wrong, I still immensely enjoyed Soul Silver when I got it, but I still can't unthink what that rigged game had told me.